Hello and welcome to Extra Credits, the series where I take interesting information I've learned about the game and I share it with you. Today's lesson is going to be the frame meter and you. This is a very interesting lesson that goes from being very basic and simple to eventually going into some pretty deep concepts of the game. So this is going to be a long one, but it starts off very simple, it builds upon itself, and it gets you to some very interesting concepts. So if you have any questions about how frames work, or frame traps, or frame kills, or counter hits, or punish counters, all that stuff kind of is part of learning how frames work in general, and that's what I want to do today. So let's start off with the basics. If you would like to access the frame meter, you want to go to the second to last tab, so I would suggest going backwards, and here's the frame meter. You just turn it on. It puts these two little bars at the bottom of your screen, and they will record any interesting frame data that occurs from interactions. What is a frame? A frame is a 60th of a second. It is the smallest increment of time that the game uses for any actions, so any action that you use will be measured in some amount of frames. For a frame of reference, 20 frames, or about a third of a second, is the average, peak human reaction time. So somewhere between 20 and 25 frames is where things start becoming reactable. Anything slower than that, and it becomes a lot easier to react to. Anything faster than that, and it becomes nigh upon impossible. So if you hear people talking about safe moves in neutral, what they're talking about is moves that are not reactable. So you see 13 frames is well below even the best human reaction time that we know. And something like, say, the standing heavy punch at 35 frames is well above the average human's reaction time. So you want something somewhere in between there. Things like this 24 frame forward medium are also generally considered to be unreactable and safe because your opponent also has to add the time of the startup of their move into their reaction. So things like this 24 frame medium or this 28 frame crouching medium also generally considered to be pretty safe pokes in neutral, but once you start getting past the 30 frame mark, things start becoming a little more dubious. So let's take a look at these little colors here. We just talked about the startup. This is the frames where you have committed to pushing a button, but the move doesn't have a hitbox out yet. You can't hit opponents with it. The pink frames are the money frames here. These are your active frames. You are hitting your opponent during these frames, and these blue frames are your recovery frames. Frames where you have still committed to pushing the button, but there's no longer any hitbox out, and you can get hit during this time, right? You can't do anything during this time. You're getting hit, and you are still just committed to the full extent of this move. So you might notice that even though there's only 6 frames that you're not hitting your opponent, the startup is considered to be 7. That's because modern conventions include the first active frame of the move in the startup of the move because it just works out more intuitively. Basically, if you are +4, that means you can use your 4-frame move as a punish. So that's a really useful indicator. So that's why it works out that way. In addition to the green, pink, and blue here, you'll also see that there are 2 other pretty common solid bars. One of them is orange, which is a projectile. They have different properties than strikes, so they are given a different color. And you'll see this yellow bar is stun. It's pretty generalized. Hit stun, throw stun, block stun, they all just show up as this yellow bar. Entertainingly, the throw itself also shows up as pink, which is kind of weird, right? Because it's usually going to be differentiated some way because it can't be blocked, but it's not here. However, despite that, this brings us to our next point, which is there are striped lines. Striped lines indicate some level of invincibility. So this gray striped line is full invincibility. So if you've ever seen somebody throw their opponent to try to avoid getting hit by a move, that's why. Throws are invincible during their animation. If you want to see if your move is an invincible reversal, you can do the same thing here. See, this gray stripe line means that the startup of the move is invincible, so that is a true invincible reversal. It will beat throws, it will beat strikes, it will beat projectiles, it beats everything. Now there are a couple of moves that are a little bit different. So remember the orange projectile? Well, Hazanchu has projectile invincibility, so it gets a striped orange line to indicate that. It is invincible to specifically projectiles. And now you see this pink line here. There are some things in the game that are invincible to strikes and throws, but not projectiles, namely most level 1s. So you'll see here, this has got that striped pink line, showing that it is invincible to strikes and throws, but not to projectiles. And those are kind of your standard indicators in the game that I'm aware of. There might be something else, but those are the ones that I know of. In addition to that, outside of the indicators it gives you, there's two other pretty important ones that I want to talk about. The first is low crush. So for example, Chun-Li's forward heavy here is a low crush. It's not invincible to lows, but it moves her hurt box up here, which means lows just miss her. So she's not technically invincible to them, but they will lose if they hit. So let's see if I can do that. If I set Chun-Li to do, or sorry, if I set Cammy to do a sweep here, and then I go for this move, you'll see that I will beat it. Even if I'm pretty close, I will just beat it because I go over it. But if I time it correctly here, she can counter hit me out of this move. There we go. You see she counter hit me out of what's obviously a forward heavy. She counter hit me there because it is not, in fact, actually invincible. It just moves her hurt box up so much that lows miss. It still acts as invincibility, though, and it does not get indicated here, so I wanted to talk about it. The next thing that does not show up here, which I was very surprised about, is anti-air invincibility. You'll see here that this move has no indication of any kind of invincibility, but if I set Cammy to jump at me with heavy kick this time instead, you'll see that even if I'm crouching, she hits me, but I can punish counter her. I can hit her on recovery with Tensho kicks, which means her active frames are over, which means I went through them. So let's try to get that for fun. Oh, a little tough, but I can definitely do it. Oh, I'm pushing the wrong button. Let's try pushing the right button. So there's the counter hit. There's the punish counter. Okay, so you see that even though I got like nothing here that shows that I'm invincible, the punish counter proves that I'm hitting her in recovery. So it's going through all of her active frames, and it's still hitting her. So there's a couple things that lay outside of the indicators in this frame box. I just wanted to let you know about them. So now with that, let's talk about this advantage and disadvantage state. So this is always net 0. This is telling you how plus you are or how minus your opponent is. These are always interchangeable. So if I'm plus 25, she's minus 25. If I'm plus 5, she's minus 5, and so on. So, and the other way around too, right? If I am super minus for some reason, like some of these are, yeah, like 0, even on hit, then it's always just a net 0. So if you add the two together, you will get 0, and that's important. It'll let you know how things work. So I told you earlier that the startup includes the first frame of a button. So you see here I'm plus 5. That means that this jab can chain into itself. The jab has a special ability called chaining usually, or canceling, which we'll get to in a second. But basically it means if I just mash jab here, it will combo because I'm plus 5 on the hit, and I have 4-frame startup move. Now, chains are a little bit different. You can see here that for some reason the startup kind of disappears on these chain moves, right? That means that this move is canceling into itself no matter how fast or slow I push the button. So I can just roll my face on this as fast as possible and it'll just work. Similarly to how certain normals into specials go, it acts a little bit differently where it cuts off the recovery of the previous move instead of cutting off the startup of the next move, but it does the same thing here, right? You can see there's no recovery after that move, which allows me to combo something that otherwise might not work. So that's how chains or cancels work. And then there's a different type of way to connect your moves, which is called a link. Basically, this is a move that needs to be timed correctly. So let's use the jab as an example here. You see this is a 5-frame advantage. Do I have a move with 5 frames of startup? I do. Standing light kick is 5 frames. The problem is, if I press the button too early, I'll just keep mashing out jabs. So if I just push it and I just mash, right? You'll see I'm holding auto, but it's still giving me jabs. I don't want jabs. I want the standing light kick. And if I do it too late, I won't be able to get the combo. It just won't combo. So a link is a very specific timing where you time it just right so that you aren't too early for the move to be a jab instead of the light kick you want, and you're not too late for it to not combo. So you can see there that comboed. You do have a little bit of buffer timing, so if you hit somewhere in this range here, you will still get the correct move that you want, but anything later doesn't work. So you want to try to be a little tiny bit early because you do have a little bit of a buffer here, but just know that that's how it works. And now why is that important? Well, because it allows you to get better combos. For example, my jab does not go into lightning kicks. You can see that doesn't work. Lightning kicks itself is 4 hits. Jab into lightning kicks, even though it's got the same cancel, right? It doesn't combo, see? 4 hits, didn't combo. But standing light kick, 5 hits. It combos. And you can see the tricks that they've done to make that work. So you might look at it and say, well, if this is 15 frames of hits done, but so is this, then how come one of them combos and one of them doesn't? Well, you see they've done 2 interesting things to make it work. The first is that since the startup of the move is 1 frame later, the stun doesn't start until 1 frame later. And second of all, you can see that when I try to jab into it, I get an extra active frame of jab that I don't want. They do this to make it so that it doesn't combo, but when I do the light kick, it removes that extra frame, which makes it so that the lightning legs kicks hits just a tiny bit earlier and can thus combo. So now, using the power of this link, I can make a combo that goes into lightning legs off of jab, even though jab doesn't work. So that's why links are really important, because they allow you to get some cool combos that you would otherwise not be capable of performing. So that's how links work. Now let's talk about this frame advantage and using it to make frame traps. So if I have Cammy set to block here, you see that on block, my medium punch is +1. So when you're talking about plus on block, this is what people are talking about, and this is why it's really important, because afterwards I can push a button first. That allows me to frame trap my opponent. So if I set Cammy to try to light punch here, off of block, and then I push a button immediately afterwards, you see I counter hit her. She doesn't have enough time to hit me in return, so I get a cool little frame trap off of it, which is pretty important. And the frame trap allows me to get a counter hit, which, as you can see, gave me more frame advantage than normal. So let's talk about counter hits real quick first. There's a couple different kinds. The first is the regular counter hit, which you can see adds 2 frames of stun to the opponent. Normally I get 5. On counter hit, I get 7 frames of advantage. On punish counter, which is again hitting their recovery, I get 9 frames of advantage. And the other way that I can get more is by using drive rush. This gives me an extra 4, so you can see I can bring up to plus 13 frames of advantage potentially on this jab. So that's pretty cool. Basically what this does is it lets you get some stuff that you might not otherwise be able to get. Similarly to how we checked our jab to see if we could get anything interesting when it was +5, we can do the same thing when it's +7. You see here, our crouching medium is in fact 7 frames. So we can do that same thing where, there we go, I get the combo. And that's nice because I now have another way to get a combo that I didn't have opened up before. This is called a counter hit only combo, and they can be very useful. Because this medium kick hits from far away, I can hit a move that normally I would not be able to hit because I'm farther away, right? This doesn't hit, but now I can combo into this medium kick, which does hit from a little farther away. So I can use that to my advantage to hit someone from farther away. Likewise, with punish counters, I can get something similar, where normally I can't get my crouching medium kick into lightning legs that are heavy, right? Heavy lightning legs is 5 hits. You see here I'm not getting it. But if I have a punish counter, I get it. And on top of that, heavy lightning legs allows me to combo after it. I can get Tensho kicks for a little bit of meterless damage. I can get another lightning legs for a safe jump setup. I can even go into super. Even a super that has to link, like my level 1, works here. You can see I can get quite a bit of damage off of this punish counter that I don't normally have access to if I don't get it. So now let's bring some of these concepts together, and let's talk about the frame trap. I'm just going to bring this back to standard. Frame trap into counter hit only combo. So you see here, if I do standing medium punch and then jab, I can beat out my opponent's jab, and I get the counter hit. And the important thing here is that, look, we're in this exact situation where the thing I would normally use doesn't work, but the crouching medium kick still hits from there. So I can get a counter hit only frame trap off of this exchange, if I do it correctly. Which might take me a second because, I'm not great at it, but the idea here is you can get this cool combo. I need to be a little bit faster on the medium kick. Okay, interesting. A little bit slower on the medium kick. See how links are tough, but they're important. There we go. See? So now I get this little counter hit only frame trap combo off of knowing how the frames work, knowing that I'm plus there, and that if my opponent pushes a button, I get a cool combo because of the counter hit. So that's really fun. And a way to figure out how to set up these counter hit situations where you go into those counter hit only combos that you see the really high level players do. Now you've got an idea of how they come up with these situations and decide to go with counter hits. The next thing I want to talk about, though, is something that lies outside of the frame data. So, spacing can be really important. And so if I just... let's see here. If I just use Chun-Li's heavy punch here, you'll see that it's -4, and we know what that means. If Cammy presses her jab here, she will punish counter me. But this heavy kick hits from really far away. From like about here, I would say, I think she punish counters me, right? Yes. But if I'm just a little bit further back, right? I was here, she punish countered me. If I'm just a little bit further back, now she misses. And this is how players set up whiff punishes. My opponent knows that this button is punishable by jab, but the spacing at which it hits versus not hitting is really, really close, right? Like, it hits me if I'm here, but it doesn't hit me if I'm just here, right? It doesn't work. Misses, hits. So my opponent has to be very precise with their spacing to try to get this punish here. And if they miss it, then guess what? They're -9 here, right? And that means, guess what we can do? Remember that crouching medium hit kick combo? I can now whiff punish my opponent for trying to punish a move that's normally punishable, and I get big damage out of it. And that's how people set up whiff punishes. You bait your opponent into thinking you're just a little bit closer than you actually are, and then you strike. So that's how you can set up whiff punishes and get punish counters, and that's how you can make punish counter combos really useful. So there you go. That's how you get the punish counters, and what a punish counter combo looks like, and how to set it up. Then, I want to talk about one last interesting thing, which is the meaty. There are two different definitions of meaty. I'm going to talk about the original one first, and then we'll go into the more current definition of meaty. So, there are several moves which are forward advancing, and if you hit them a little bit farther away, again with spacing, they will be a little bit less minus or more plus. So for example, we already know that Chun-Li's heavy punch is -4 on block. But what about if I'm just a smidge further away? Like about here. Now it's -2. You can see what I've done is, instead of hitting on the very first frame of my active frames, I'm hitting on the very last frame of my active frames, making this attack meaty. And it does the same sort of thing that the jab versus the light kick did earlier, where even though it's the same amount of block stun, I'm pushing that block stun further back, making it so that I am a little bit closer in to making this move. It's unpunishable now, which is nice, and on certain moves you can even make them plus if you do something like this. So that's the first thing you can do, and similarly to the light kick versus the light punch, that can potentially change what combos you're able to get off of it, or what buttons you're allowed to press afterwards. So another example here is, this one might take me a bit, but I'm going to do it because it's worth it. The old meaty, that's the old meaty, is hitting your button really late, right, into the active frames. The new meaty is often used to mean that you are hitting your opponent on their knockdown in such a way that they can't press a button on wake up. Basically, meaty timing means that you frame trap your opponent from their invincibility on wake up. So if I remove this and I do a knockdown here, you'll see I have 33 frames of advantage on Chun-Li's standard knockdown on her sweep. Now, what I want to do is I want to have a move be meaty, so she can't press a button. And to do that, I'm going to do something called a frame kill. Basically, I'm going to abuse the fact that Cammy is invincible to throw out a move that I know is going to whiff in order to make sure that I have my move hit. You don't have to do this, right? You can definitely just sweep your opponent, and then on their wake up you can time the correct timing to catch them, right? You can see here, I hit her with just normal timing, right? She woke up right here, and I hit her exactly on the frame that she woke up, so she can't do anything. But that's really hard to do, right? I had to time that perfectly. I could not do that consistently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to frame kill. I know that I have 33 frames of advantage, and look at that. My crouching medium is 28 frames total. And my jab here, you see, hits on frame 4, but it also hits on frame 5 and frame 6. So 33 minus 28 is 5 frames. So she'll wake up on frame 6, and she'll get hit perfectly meaty by this jab. So let me try to do that. It might take a second because there are some links that I have to do here, but it's super worth it to see. Okay, not perfect. We messed up a little bit, but you can see I messed up 1 frame here and 1 frame here. Still got that perfect meaty timing. Pretty nice, right? I got my 5 frames of advantage like I want, and it helps me out. Now let me try to be a little bit cleaner with it. Oh, a little bit cleaner. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Because I was perfectly clean on both of my setups here, because you get several frames of buffer to do both of these moves, now I'm plus 7. You know what that means, right? If I was plus 7 there, I could actually just combo into lightning legs. You can't combo jab into lightning legs. But here, suddenly it's a combo. See that? So now you can use the power of meaties to create combos and situations you normally wouldn't. You're plus 7 there. You know what that means? That means that you can use slower moves that you normally might not be able to use as frame traps. Some moves that might get you huge damage combos if you hit with them. Something like, for example, this 11 frame start up heavy is really powerful, but at 5 frames it's not good enough, right? At plus 5 it doesn't work. At plus 7 we're getting to the point where it will either trade with jab or beat anything else. So if I trade this with a jab, I think I just get a combo off of it. So it's really bad for my opponent because I'm now plus 7 on that jab because I used a frame kill to get a meaty setup. So there's some really interesting stuff you can use. The rabbit hole goes even deeper than that as far as figuring out specific setups for specific characters and all kinds of crazy stuff you can do. But this is kind of the baseline that you can use to make all of those interesting sequences and how to structure your pressure and figure out how to come up with good frame traps and that sort of thing. This is how you would do that. So if you ever see opponents whiffing when they get knockdowns, that means they're probably using a frame kill setup. So, now you know a bunch of really interesting things that you can use to iterate on your own pressure structure and decision making in all aspects of Street Fighter. So I hope this helped you out. I'm going to be continuing on with my Going for Gold series, and I hope to see you there.